hear that term, you usually think, well, I don't know what that means. And then you go, well, what could that possibly mean? So the purpose of this lecture will be to discuss instructional design and look at that in the context of instructional designers, which we also call curriculum coordinators or curriculum designers, and then get a general idea of what they are, look at some of the methods they do, and look at also some interview questions they might have, look at some different programs that they do, and then just kind of get an understanding of what they do. That's it. So that's the whole concept of instructional design. For this lecture, I've chosen 2 articles. The first article just gives a very strict definition of instructional design. The second article is going to do a more in-depth research-based, and then we have a lot of videos to intermingle with this. So the first thing we need to do is just, what is an instructional designer? So with that said, let me just show you a video.
Mr. Parker Harrison. He is the new director of the Highway Safety Division. His first goal is to reduce the amount of accidents that occur when drivers are overtaking semi-trucks on the highway. It has been observed that drivers are not following the proper procedures for overtaking semi-trucks on the highway due to either lack of knowledge or improper training. The current training is a handbook that lists out procedures followed by a written exam. Mr. Harrison wants to create a standard for safe driving that will prevent accidents. He needs a training program that will educate drivers on how to properly overtake a semi-truck and improve safety. Mr. Harrison calls on John, a specialist in instructional design, to talk about implementing an instructional training model that will reduce and possibly eliminate the high number of accidents that occur due to improper overtaking of vehicles on the highway. John suggests they use a 5-step process for systematically developing a training material. They are the analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation, also known as the AD model. Mr. Harrison is very excited to start the process for building the training module. In the analysis phase, Mr. Harrison answers a series of questions that identify the current problem, specific needs, objectives, and goals for the training module. Harrison and the instructional design team identify the following objective for the training module. By the end of this course, drivers will know how to safely drive around an 18-wheeler truck. Mr. Harrison, John, and his team of instructional designers work closely with the subject matter experts to put together an action plan and goals. They agreed there are 3 steps to achieving the desired goal for the training module. They include understanding blind spots, giving the semi-truck enough space, and overtaking a truck on the left side. In the design phase, instructional designers, the project manager, and the subject matter experts use the information from the analysis team to examine and activate the best teaching strategy. They decide the best media and strategy for this project will use a combination of graphics, rich media, audio-video, and a pamphlet to explain the procedures. A script and production schedule is created and sent to the developers who will begin construction of the training material. The project manager meets with Mr. Harrison to approve the design. The designs are approved and off they go to the developers. The development team of designers, animators, cameramen, editors, writers, and graphic artists are assembled to begin construction of the training material. The animation experts and graphic designers create rich media for the training program. Images and diagrams of the proper overtaking procedures are produced for the pamphlet to complete the set. Before the implementation phase, an evaluation is done at this point to make sure the training program serves the proposed objective. In the implementation phase, the instructional designer and evaluators deliver the training materials to Mr. Harrison at the Highway Safety Division. Select drivers attend the training program to test the effectiveness of the module. Evaluators are present to ensure quality control and proper implementation of the course. In the evaluation process, the drivers are given an opportunity to exercise their knowledge in the field. They are also given a questionnaire to assess their knowledge of the procedures of how to overtake a semi-truck properly. It is determined by the evaluator that the driver's proficiency in overtaking a semi-truck has improved after taking the training program. Mr. Harrison and drivers feel that learning with video, graphics, drawings, and animation help them learn and better understand the procedures. The instructional training course is now ready to be introduced to the general public. Mr. Harrison is happy because the new instructional training program will increase road safety and save lives. He is also happy because he will also be getting a promotion.
So that gives you an idea of just what an instructional designer does. As we look at this article, it says, to integrate technology with education is a well-accepted need. And this article is based in Turkey, and it talks about the FATA project. And it was planned to accomplish until 2016, and it was to supply 620,000 interactive boards for classrooms and a tablet computer for each teacher and student. So I saw that article, and when I teach it, go out to Lauderdale County and Meridian, I keep hearing that there's this big movement towards getting Chromebooks and items such as that. So I was like, well, this, Turkey is leading the way with this, so that'd be a good idea to bring this article in. When you look at Turkey, you need to remember that Turkey's kind of ahead of us on education. A lot of research articles deal with Turkey, and they're coming out of Turkey, and it's quite amazing. That's why whenever I saw in the news, and I've seen the news over the past several months about Turkey, and they're having a purge, and they're trying to get rid of scholars, and that's very disturbing, and that means that their schools are being monitored and being locked down. And that's not a good thing, because it's going to really hurt a lot of their research coming out of there, and also, obviously, it's also going to interrupt their lives. As I scroll down here, it says right here that instructional design, or they're going to call it ID, is a systematic process that is employed to develop education and training programs in a consistent and reliable fashion. So you see what instructional design is. It's the idea of creating a program to help someone learn how to teach or how to teach something. Instructional design, or ID, is a complex process that is creative, active, and interactive. Although the exact origins of the process are debated, you're looking at the idea that it came around the 1960s, 65 and 68. The use of systematic design procedures can make instruction more effective. So that's the whole idea of instructional design, is if we use some of these designs that are well published, then we can actually make teaching more effective. So by using these designs, we can bring those in. And the number one design that everyone uses in instructional design is the ADDIE method. And this can really help for your comps or taking any kind of test or any midterm or final. ADDIE is a major component of instructional design. So what is ADDIE? All descriptions include the core elements, also referred to as phases of analysis: designs, development, implementation, and evaluation. So it's analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. That is what ADDIE is. So instructional design uses the ADDIE method a lot. And look at this analysis. You analyze the student characteristics. So I'm just going to give you a real-world example so you can kind of put this in context. Not using the highway patrol, the highway project, but just yours in general. You've been hired. You're a really good teacher, and you've been hired as a curriculum coordinator at a school district. So this is your big move towards the central office, and they are going to hire you as a curriculum coordinator. And a curriculum coordinator is also known as that's right, you got that, the instructional design or developer. So your design is to plan all of these different ways that people can become better teachers. Well, first thing you're going to need to do is to analyze the student characteristics. So you're going to look at the demographics of your school, and you're going to look at all those elements like that. Prerequisite knowledges, online experience, attitudes, learning styles. This is usually in the central office when they have a demographic breakdown. So you have to do all this kind of research, find out where your students are coming from, dropout rates, and elements such as that. You analyze the learning context, how much learners can learn, analyze content to be learned, and then you define the learning goals and objectives. So this is a big component of instructional design, and as well as curriculum. I always want to call them curriculum coordinators. The big component of that is having to analyze and look at your demographics. That's why many times curriculum coordinators, I'm going to call them curriculum coordinators, and I'm going to interchange that word because they're also called instructional designers. But from now on, I'm just going to call them curriculum coordinators. The curriculum coordinators that you see, usually it's best to bring them out from inside the school district because they have a learning experience of that school. Also, curriculum coordinators are generally, if you're going to hire someone, it's best to hire someone with a background similar to your school district. So if you can't hire someone from Meridian to be your curriculum coordinator, you may want to hire someone from Mississippi or have some kind of general background such as that, because they're going to be able to relate to the demographics and the characteristics. Although there is an argument about hiring someone from the outside because they have fresh perspectives, but that's why you definitely need to vet them pretty good. Design on the main instructional strategies. How will the learners interact with content? The lectures, the projects, the presentations, the activities or exercises. And you want to design definitely an assessment plan. Kind of sounds like lesson plan building. Development. Construct a detailed syllabus, develop and require course materials, develop assignment, project resources, and develop assessment items. Implementations. Learners complete the course as designed. Learners are assessed according by the designed assessments, and instructors monitor, guides, and facilitates as learners complete the course. Evaluations, formative, instructional effectiveness, summative. So you have all of these. So it's just kind of like the same way you have the teaching program, but that's what the ADDIE model is. I can explain it that way with this chart, or I can show you a video of the ADDIE method, which actually works better. So let me go ahead and send that to you right now.
ADDIE is an instructional design model that helps instructors, instructional designers, and training specialists plan and create instruction. The ADDIE model is used to create all kinds of instruction, from showing call center employees how to use a new software system to training military personnel to use specific tactical strategies. In this presentation, however, we will use simpler examples to illustrate the ADDIE principles. The ADDIE model includes 5 phases: analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. Let's take a closer look at the second phase, the design phase. During the design phase, curriculum developers design assessments, choose a course format, and create an instructional strategy. It may seem counterintuitive to design the assessment of a course before you begin creating the content, but it is actually very helpful to know how you are going to test your learners' knowledge, attitude, and skills about your subject when you are creating your instructional materials. To design effective assessments, you are going to use a lot of what you learned during the previous ADDIE phase, the analysis phase. Dick, Carey, and Carey point out that there are 4 areas to consider when designing a good assessment question or task: the instruction's goals, learner, and context, as well as the assessment itself. It is very important to consider the goals of your instruction as you design your assessment. Let's say you are teaching a group of not-so-computer literate folks about how to use email. During the analysis phase, you would have created performance objectives, or what the students would do to demonstrate that they learned the content. Now, you can use these performance objectives to help you create effective assessments. If one of your performance objectives was for students to demonstrate how to open up a web browser and sign into a web-based email account, then you should make sure to test that knowledge at the end of the course. As you write out this question or task, remember to keep in mind what you learned about your learners during the analysis phase. In our example, your learners aren't very computer literate, so you should avoid using unnecessarily obscure or complicated terms in your assessment. Whenever possible, you should assess skills like this in a context as close to the eventual performance setting as possible. Having them answer a multiple choice question about how to sign into an email account won't be nearly as effective as giving them a task to do so on a physical computer. And be sure to be thorough when you research your learner's performance context. Let's say you find out that, after your course is over, your students will be using PCs to write their emails. Then you would do well to assess them on a PC. It wouldn't be helpful to have them do it on a Mac or on a smartphone. Make sure your assessment questions and tasks are written clearly with correct punctuation and grammar. Also, avoid the temptation to trick learners by intentionally writing complicated or misleading questions. If your instructional goal is to help students learn to use email, then test them on that, not on how good they are at answering trick questions. Once you know how your learners are going to be tested, then you can go about choosing a course format. The course format, also sometimes called the delivery system, is the medium by which the course content is presented to learners. Courses can be taught in a traditional classroom setting, by correspondence, as a telecourse, through a self-paced workbook, over the internet, or in a blended course that combines different methods. In our example, we know that your students are going to be tested using PC computers. It would be most effective then to choose a course format that would allow them to use PC computers when you teach them, like a computer lab. Now that you've designed your assessment and picked the course format, you can begin to create your instructional strategy. An instructional strategy is the collection of lectures, readings, discussions, projects, worksheets, assessments, and activities to help the students learn the course content. Dick, Carrie, and Carrie have outlined 5 major learning components that are part of an overall instructional strategy. They are the pre-instructional activities, the content presentation, learner participation, assessment, and follow-through activities. When planning your pre-instructional activities, first include a way to motivate your learners. In our example, you could talk to your students about how using email could benefit them, perhaps by helping them pay their bills more effectively or keeping in touch with relatives. Motivating your learners will help them see the value of your material and internalize the instruction. Then, plan a way to illustrate the course objectives. This will help them mentally organize the components of the instruction and know how they're going to apply their knowledge. There are a few things to keep in mind when planning your content presentation. First, make sure your content is concise and not filled with unnecessary detail. Just stick to the objectives of the class. It may sound fun to relay the history of email and how it got started, but it isn't going to help your students reach the objective of the class. And be sure to include examples. This could be as simple as walking students through the process of signing onto an email account on a digital projector. It is very important to plan plenty of learner participation in your instructional strategy. This means allowing your students to practice a task as well as providing them with feedback. In our example, you could let students try sending you a message on their own computers and then tell them what they did right or where they tripped up. You will then want to plan for assessment in your instructional strategy. In addition to the final assessment we talked about earlier, you may want to include practice assessments as well as a final attitude assessment, which asks your learners how they felt about the course. The final thing you want to include in your instructional strategy is a set of follow-through activities. This is a review of the entire course strategy with an eye toward helping students internalize and apply the instruction after the class is over. So that's the basic overview of the design phase of the ADDIE model. Designing assessments, choosing the right course format, and carefully putting together an instructional strategy will make developing your course content a lot more easy and effective. In our next video, we'll discuss the second D in the ADDIE process, the development phase. We'll see you then.
I borrowed that video, obviously, from YouTube. They break down all of those A, D, D, I, but for some reason they only broke down the first 2. So I picked the design one. I think they quit after that. You probably can find it though. But that was just an example of what the ADDIE movement does, the model. This next section right here, although the ADDIE activities mentioned earlier represent the fundamental concepts of the instructional design process, there are several characteristics that should be evident when the process is employed. These include the following. ID is learner-centered, goal-oriented, focuses on a meaningful performance, assumes an outcome can be measured in a reliable and valid way, empirical, and typically in a team effort. That's one of the big focus points of instructional design, is it's not about the teacher, it's about the learner. So when you're doing instructional design, it's not about how well the teacher is. Instructional design is supposed to be designed that anyone can do it. So I need you to get more real world on that. When you think about a curriculum coordinator and what the school district wants them to hire as an instructional designer, they say, look, we need you to create packets for our history teachers on how they can teach some of the subject area testing programs, or how they can teach PARC, or how they can teach all these elements. Well, they go, okay, but it's not about the curriculum coordinator, it's about the packet they create. And the packet should be able to test, to live for a long period of time with or without the instructor. So I'm talking very abstract, but the point is that this section right here, there may be no initial assumption that a live teacher is even needed. So instructional designers should definitely create pieces that can be used like a mold and in a notebook. I have seen this firsthand. I have seen school districts pay large amounts of money for anti-bullying programs, mentoring programs, and the person comes in and he says, well, this program was designed by so-and-so in California. So he's just selling that product. And then he says, here's everybody's notebook, and everybody takes a notebook, and he says, here's the program that you can have. I've seen these poorly implemented, and I've seen these greatly implemented that was just very good. The poorly implemented, they pretty much just gave us the binder and said, sit it on your desk, and everyone just kind of threw it away. And then the very well implemented, everyone becomes owners, and it's very student-centered. Items such as that. This also now starts talking about the Assure model, which is the model they use. But I want to show you an instructional designer during an interview. So these are people trying to get a job as a curriculum coordinator, instructional designer, and they're going to give some insight in how they would answer some of these questions as an instructional designer.
Welcome to Technology and Education Today. I'm Richard Smith.
And I'm Caroline Crawford, and we are coming to you from the University of Houston Clear Lake in Houston, Texas, USA.
And today we are discussing the typical questions that you might incur if you apply for a job as an instructional designer or an instructional developer. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking encounter instead of incur, but okay.
But to move the show along, what are you thinking?
Well, one would imagine that people would want to discuss with you what you know about instructional design. Just a thought.
Okay, so there's...
And training and
okay,
aspects like that.
I think one typical question they might ask right away is, can you describe the ADDIE model?
ADDIE makes sense. Some people know a little bit about Dick and Carey. There are several models out there. They may also just say, instead of ADDIE, choose a model and tell me about it. Which one do you prefer using and why?
Okay. Now...
But much like you, I would choose the ADDIE model.
Yes, well, it's kind of popular.
Or my own. My own published model.
But this is not going to help the people get a job.
No.
So let's figure out another question that they might be asked. If you're sitting there...
Ask about training.
Such as?
What are your training experiences? When you ran into a problem while you were developing a training event, how did you deal with it? Tell me about the problem and tell me about the resolution.
Okay, so...
They're trying to figure out your personality is my impression. Who are you? Might you fit into the company? And what kind of working person are you? Do you work like myself? I work a whole bunch for short periods of time, and I need a break. Bunch of work.
Okay, so
break.
So another question might be, what is your work style?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How about, I think one might ask, or expect to be asked, can you describe your approach to instructor-based training as opposed to web-based training?
That would make sense because they are, well, I would suggest that they're a different approach, but perhaps other people don't. Mm-hmm. Although, on the other hand, you still do go through the basic instructional processes. You just have different outcomes, different deliverables. But that is a very good point. And mm-hmm. Why wouldn't people want to know your perceptions of it?
Okay, so the applicant should be prepared for that question.
It's a good idea. As well as you said with the ADDIE model, how do you go about developing different objectives? And if people have gone through traditional ID programs, instructional design programs, most likely at some point they're going to wait for you to mention that once you develop the objectives, the assessment should be developed directly
Okay, so a
relational.
question, there's going to be a question on how you develop objectives,
I would imagine so.
and then another question on your approach to assessment.
I would imagine so. It would make sense.
Mhm.
As well as the analysis phase. How do you go about developing a needs assessment? What kind of outcome would you expect if you have a problem? What are the aspects that you work through as human performance technology type question? How do you go about obtaining a needs assessment? What is that little gap analysis where when people desire an outcome and what's really occurring, what is that gap analysis? How do you come up with that process?
I think another area that the applicant can expect to be questioned about is how you get information from a subject matter expert.
Oh, absolutely. Good point, good point. And how do you engage with people as well?
Well, you'd have to...
Piggybacking on your statement, well, how would you obtain information from an SME? Well, true, but how do you develop relationships with people? Not only the person interviewing you, but in general, can you discuss, can you converse on your beliefs about how you work with others? Like, are you an introvert or extrovert, and can you flip between the two at need? Not necessarily at will, but at need.
You know, another question that always pops up, and these questions are not in any particular order, but how do you see your...
Obviously.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh, you know, I ask my advisees that all the time, and I get a deer in the headlights look because it's such a silly, strange question. And I hate when people ask me those questions, but it helps, as an advisor, gauging how to help support the advisee. So it would make sense, as someone who's coming on as an employee, what do you want to accomplish 5 years from now? Where do you see yourself professionally?
Right, and that question, because if you don't have that information, then you probably don't have a career plan.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't have a 5-year plan because I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. I might decide that I'm just going to go find a ship and sail away.
Yes, I'm expecting that.
But you expect that from me?
I'm expecting that to occur. Yes, absolutely. Another question that the applicant should expect is, how does your prior experience prepare you for the role that you are seeking now, or the job that you're seeking now?
Good question. That's a hard question. Because really, how do you respond to that?
Well, you have to have had, you need to
It's
describe...
kind of a dull question.
Well, you need to be able to describe your prior experience coherently
Succinctly.
and succinctly, and you also need to be able to describe your training for the position, your education for the position. You be able and not hem and haw when you do it, because an instructional designer or an instructional developer is a person that is going to have to work with other people.
Needs to be able to speak well.
Need to be able to speak well. Yes, definitely.
Well, and if you don't speak well, one may assume that you do not communicate well in general, meaning through writing, through the written word, through verbal means. Therefore, as an instructional designer or as a trainer, people who are developing audio and video files and written text, that could be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Another area that you can expect a question on is, and this is typical for many different types of jobs, but you should expect a question on describing a time when you faced a problem in instructional design, an on-the-job problem. What did you do to solve that problem?
That's another hard one. Because you really don't want to bash where you've been before.
Yes.
Why would you want to speak poorly about where you've been previously? But it's that fine little line describing the situation without negatively slamming the people or organization involved.
Absolutely. Another question I think that you can expect is, do you have a particular theory backing your ideas behind instructional design? Or do you borrow from learning theory? Because you never can tell when you're going to get a manager who is into this sort of stuff. And I've seen it happen. They'll say, well, how would you integrate Bloom's taxonomy into the development of the training that you are asked
Naturally.
to provide.
It should be integrated naturally. You need the knowledge and
Yeah.
move
Well,
up the food chain.
You don't have to answer my questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm just thinking.
Yeah, no, but
yeah,
you're
I
right.
understand your point, but
You're right.
but that's true. That is a good point. So many different models, whether we're talking about the ARC's or Kilpatrick's work or
Yes.
whomever.
Mhm.
That is a very good point. All of a sudden, they start throwing names out to, I suppose, either to check whether or not you know what you're talking about, whether or not you have a
show off
background,
how much they know.
or show off how much they know. It's like, really? Come on. I got better things to do with my time. But you do need to be conversant. That's a fair statement.
Absolutely. And another question that you're liable to get is to describe your work style. Now, that's a question that you can get for
We
any
talked about
position.
that just a moment ago, about how I like to work really hard and then take a break. And work really hard, take a break. Remember that?
You better have a coherent answer for that.
Well, it's an honest answer. I work really hard to get the job done and meet deadlines or exceed deadline, as in offering it beforehand. But then I need a break. My brain needs downtime too.
And speaking of downtime, I think we've reached the end of this edition of Technology and Education Today.
Yay, Dr. Smith!
I'm Richard Smith.
I'm Caroline Crawford, and we are coming to you from the University of Houston Clear Lake in Houston, Texas, USA. Bye!